What is up, my people? How we doing today? Today we're gonna talk about art. This is gonna be my first video talking about art and the impact that it made on me. Like different types of artists, have made an impact on me personally. As far as how I draw and how I how I do my compositions when it comes to a page or when it comes to panels and stuff like that. Um, and where most of my influence comes from, you know. And for me, it's five main ones that I could think about. That made a big impact on me, and not just me, just a lot of people in general. A lot of the guys on my list are known, across different industries, be it comic books, comic book strips, um, games, different types of video games, and some of them transcend, both games and comic books or manga, and yeah, it's nice to go back and kind of look, who were the artists that made the biggest impacts on your style and on the way that you like art. And so far, really, there hasn't been any other artist that I could see that has kind of taken their place. And for me personally, these five artists are the main ones that I could think of. And the first one that I want to talk about is um the thing is I don't know his name, and the reason is because I've never known who the author who the author was Arthur who the author was for these comic books, because they never have them in the front page or inside the book. I actually purchased one of these recently, and I was unable to figure out who the artist was, because that was the main reason I wanted to purchase it. Part of it was nostalgia, the fact that I grew up on these little stupid books. And these books were little mini comics that will come inside of Chinko pants. I don't know if you guys remember Chinko pants. And I had one pair. I really wasn't that big on the Chinko pants, but I did have one pair, and one of these came in there. I forgot which one it was because I had so many of them. Like after I got that first comic book, I remember I had about five of them. I had the first issue, the second issue, the third, and the fourth, I believe, and even the fifth issue where he turns into Frankenstein or something like that. But my point is, like, I had a bunch of these, and what I would do is I would redraw some of them. For some reason I thought that was a good idea. I would redraw some of it, and I would just look at them because it just looked so cool to me. Just the way that it looked, it was simple to draw. And before this, my style was leaning towards drawing things in the real world exactly how they were. That was what I was kind of taught to do in school, to just put an object in front of you and draw what you see. Be it a can, be it an apple. Usually it's an apple, or some vases. That's the classic um, prompts that they use in art class. Um, and I thought that was okay. It was a little boring for me personally, but everybody liked the way I draw, and everybody liked when I draw from life because it looks just like what we're looking at. But to me, it was boring because drawing realistic, kind of just is just, might as well just take a picture from it. The process is fine to look at, but once the finished product is there, I really don't see much to look at, as opposed to something like this, where there's a lot more expression involved in the lines and the characters. I don't know. I just really enjoyed this art style. I really enjoyed the way they did action scenes. I really enjoyed, a lot of the art in general. It's a very hip hop style art. And that was the main thing that got me, is that almost a hip hopish style of art. The way they drew, the buildings, the way they drew, the logo Flamehead. It was very much like tagging, like somebody tagged it on the paper, and it reminded me of tagging, like a graffiti and graffiti art, and the characters that sometimes the graffiti artists would draw next to their graffiti, whatever they would write on the wall. Let's say they would write Flamehead. They would make a graffiti art of Flamehead, and then they would draw the character right next to it. This is what this looked like to me, and I remember thinking that this was a comic book based on that type of art. And to me, it was like, the best thing ever, because before that, all you had, it wasn't nothing that represented hip hop, or represented, like, to me, hip hop represented mostly the people, like the more poor people, and most of the art that you had in comic books was things that were a little bit more on the mainstream side and the more realistic side. And anatomy was the number one thing that these mainstream comics were doing. And when you go to the streets and you see some of these drawings, yes, anatomy is there, but the main thing that was there was self-expression of the human body, the way they can make it contort. Similar to what Spider-Man was doing. When I forgot who started drawing him, but how Spider-Man, he has good human anatomy, but he's doing these crazy poses. They kind of express what he's actually doing. He's just swinging through the buildings and stuff like that. And this artist, whoever he is, they were big on that, on the expressions of the hands, on the buildings look like they're dancing to a beat, to me. And to me, this was kind of like a hip hop style, or a graffiti style of art. And I've always thought that was cool. And I remember even buying a book. I forgot the name of the book, but something, how to draw hip hop art. And they would teach you how to draw the characters, because usually back in the day, like I said, it would be like a graffiti art, a tag or whatever, and then it would have right next to it a face of some kind of character that they would draw. And it was very simply drawn, very cartoony drawn, and easy to reproduce. That's the main thing, is your character had to be easy to reproduce. And that's what I liked about these characters. They're easy to reproduce, and they're just easily recognized. And that's something that attracted me way more than what I was doing before, which was trying to draw from real life. Because if in my head, if I could create a character that was easily reproduced, then I could start making stickers out of it and start putting it in walls. Because that was the best thing to do back in the day, is to come up with a logo or come up with a character and stick it in walls and become famous that way. Back in the day, like, we didn't have social media, and we didn't have we had internet, but we were just getting started with the internet back in the time when I discovered this. And but it wasn't to where you could get popular that way. Back then, you had to get popular through word of mouth, and one of those things was stickers. Also, you could make stickers and post them in the lockers, post them in the walls and everywhere. And people would see the art and they would be like, oh, who is that guy? And then, oh, I know that guy. He's this guy. And now people know who to go to for art. And there was competition. Of course there was competition because everybody, not everybody, but there was a couple of kids that wanted to be the best artists back in the day. And there was definitely a competition between the people that would draw back in the day, and you have to be good at everything. You have to be good at drawing in paper. You have to be drawing with spray paints. And the more tools that you knew how to use back in the day, the better you were, because what if you can't do tattoos, which I couldn't, but there was people out there that could actually do, tattoo art. But anyways, I'm getting too deviated on how it used to be. But another guy that influenced me because of the same reasons is a guy called Aaron McGruver. I forgot his name. I knew I was going to forget it. His first name is Aaron, and his last name is McGraver or something like that. But he's the guy who came up with the Boondocks. And his name is right there, Aaron McGruder. Aaron McGruder. And Aaron McGruder is a guy who influenced me a lot. Now, this was after Flamehead. And I remember thinking, man, I got to find somebody else, an artist that I could follow. Because Flamehead, I couldn't follow him because he's the artist. I never knew who he was. Right? I never knew who he was. So it's not like I could follow him because he's like a mysterious, like, ghost writer or something. Right? So, or at least to me, because I never figured out who he was. And then later on, this was actually in college when I discovered Aaron McGregor, which is crazy. That's back in, I believe, 2015 or something around that time. No, actually before that. It was way back in the day. But my point is, when I discovered these comic book strips in the back of a school newspaper, if I can recall. Yeah, that's how it was. That's exactly how it was. And I remember looking at it and thinking, this is the type of art that I like. Very simple, the way he just recreates this character. You could tell that he's just using a couple of lines here and there, and he's able to show so much with those lines. So that's the kind of stuff that I like. The fact that he could just, draw that fast. And I started to get into a lot of, after I discovered the Boondocks and the art within the Boondocks, I started to get into a lot of these comic book strip artists, because a lot of them have that same ability to make a couple of lines in the page, and they were able to get a lot of that across to the public or to the viewers. I thought it was something that was very interesting, and I thought that it was very similar, in my personal opinion, to Flamehead. The only difference is that for me was that the Boondocks did a little bit more emphasis on the eyes and the mouth, and the Boondocks made a little afro for their character. When the Flamehead character, he didn't have a mouth most of the time, or it was just implied that he had a mouth, but they never actually drew the mouth. And the eyeballs were never really emphasized either, and he had flames for hair instead of. So for me, it was very similar. And I just thought it was the coolest thing ever. Like, this type of art was my favorite. And it was easy to do. Like I said, it was easy to reproduce. And that was the main thing that I liked about these types of artists. So it was me kind of transitioning from something that was more real as far as art goes into something that was simple but still got the point across. And these are the type of artists that I personally, was influenced by, and personally made a big impact in my life. Now, the words and stuff, I'm gonna be honest. At the beginning, I did it. I could care less. I could care less about what the Boondocks was about or anything like that. Of course, later, um, there was a show on Adult Swim, and I remember seeing those characters and thinking, wow, I could see that as the character. It just looks a little different, a little bit more, I guess, well done or something like that, or more anime like. Um, so yeah, so I thought it was pretty cool. Um, but like I said, for me the main influence that got me wasn't really the show, the Boondocks show, even though it did influence me as well, because um the art in the TV show was also pretty good, and a little bit more dynamic, but I didn't really get my dynamic poses from the Boondocks. Um, I kind of copy other artists, I want to get into those guys in a little bit here. And I guess you could say this is my number three, right? My number three is Daigo Ikano from Third Strike. And again, this is another one of these guys whose art isn't, like, I don't know. It's just like I said. It's like brush strokes. You can see the brush strokes, even though it's a little bit more, you know, detailed than someone like Aaron and the Boondock Saints, or the Flamehead guy, who I still don't know who he is. But Daigo Ikano, you could still see those brush strokes. Kind of like a Zen master, or a comic book strip guy. But he had like a mixture of the detail and also the brush strokes, or the brush strokes or the pin strokes. Um, and he wasn't afraid to like make mistakes, I guess you could say, or to make like the bigger, thicker lines. He was definitely an influence to me, and I wish I could draw more like him. I wish I could be more free like the way he is. Like, for example, this one here. You could still see some of the mistakes. You could still see some of the lines that he hasn't erased yet, but he keeps it that way anyways. And you look at it, and it's just that good. You know, I personally can't do it. I wish I could. And but it's just something just keeps holds me back from it. And a lot of times when I don't erase the lines and I don't do a lot of the correcting, a lot of people like that. It's just something that I can't do, me personally. I just can't do it. But like I said, I wish I could. This is why this is one of the guys that I like how he draws, because of the natural way his lines look, how he doesn't care that some of these lines end up being thick at the end. I have a thing in my mind to where I want my lines to be thin at the end. Yeah, I don't know what it is, but you look at this guy, he doesn't care. He has lines that are thick everywhere, and he leaves it that way, and it becomes part of the awesomeness of his art style. But I'm gonna try to do better and to be more like this guy, because his shit looks crazy good. He's one of the best artists, me personally, and the most influential artist for me personally. The Third Strike that's the reason that's one of the best games, because of the art. And because of the art within the game as well. And I think it influenced even stuff like Street Fighter 4, and even to right now, Street Fighter 6. When you see those brush strokes within the game, that's really what you're getting is an influence from Daigo Ikano. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. He's the guy who did that brushstroke thing, and then from Third Strike on over, from his art on over, is where we continue to see that brushstroke be part of the game. And look, like this right here. There's still lines that he hasn't erased, and he's not going to, because he knows that they look badass, and they do. And this is something that I have to get better at. Something that I have to get. And I don't know what I need to do to do that. I guess accepting my mistakes or something, or they're not even mistakes. They just look good the way it looks on him. It looks good when he does it, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, so it's gonna take practice, and I'm thinking I'm gonna have to just draw with a pen, because the thing that I usually do is I first I do it with a pencil, and then I go over it with an ink brush or an ink pen, depending on what the line value requires. Um, but I feel like maybe this guy isn't doing that. Maybe he's just getting like a pen and just going, you know, going wild on the paper. Maybe he does the paint first and then he does the ink after. Who knows? Who knows? But yeah, definitely one of the best. But let's move on to my number two, guys. My number two. You know him. You've heard of him. You love him. His name is Bangus. And he goes by many other names, but I know him by Bangus. And he's one of the best. In fact, he was gonna be my number one, because he's the most influential artist that I personally know about and have seen his art in everything that I like. It was an X-Men versus Street Fighter, Marvel Superheroes versus Street Fighter, Marvel versus Capcom, Marvel vs. Capcom 2. What else? Street Fighter 5. Street Fighter 6. And by the way, he's currently not with Capcom anymore, which is crazy. He's currently not with Capcom anymore. He's moved on to another company, a new company that's about to get started with another guy who also left Capcom, who worked on Devil May Cry, I believe. And so yeah, they're gonna start their own company, and Daigo's gonna be working for him, so drawing for him and stuff. So I mean, but just look at this stuff. Look at the way they're thick where they need to be thick, and they're skinny where they need to be skinny, and the emotions that he's able to portray within the characters. And how his style kind of changes as well. Like right here, he was required to make something that looks like a comic book, and he was able to do very well at it. He was able to pick up that style of a comic book artist, which I think is pretty cool, and the same thing goes over here. Look at how loose he is with his art as well. Like I said, he's not overcorrecting stuff. He's not worried too much about some of the stuff that's just kind of like shaded or heshed. He's just having fun, and it just looks natural. Some of the poses that they just look natural. You can see on the stick, he drew the stick, and he's not really worried about the lines that that aren't erased on the stick. You get what I'm saying? Like, this is the type of stuff that I personally suck at. And I wish I could be better at it, because those are the types of guy that I like. Those are the types of artists that I like. Like more loose artists with great line value, but like not too clean, like kind of like, more organic or more quick with it, um that first decision, in my opinion, is probably what I'm gonna gotta work at more. Be more like a Zen master. You seen those guys? I don't know if you've seen those guys that draw. The Zen guys, they don't really spend that much time on the drawing. They look at the paper. They spend more time thinking about the page and breathing and concentrating, and then they just go splash some paint on it. And then you look at it like, what is it? And then it's over, and it's like, bro, that's a freaking work of art. That's a bird flying away to the sky or something. That's usually what Zen guys draw, is like a guy sitting down or a bird, eating fish or whatever. But I feel like that's the same style that these Japanese artists have, developed. There's something similar to that, something more loose with the paintbrush or the ink pen, whatever they're using. But yeah, Daigo, man, he's a beast. And the art that he produces is some of the best that I've ever seen. But he has an influencer. Even he has a guy who influenced him, and I think he said it before. I don't remember where he said it, but he said one of his biggest influences was Akira Toriyama. And by the way, his art, before we get to that, his art has changed over the years. And a lot of people say that his art isn't as good as it used to be. I think it's still good. I mean, it is different. It's a bit more minimalist than it used to be. But I like it because I don't know. I just like when artists find their peak. And a peak isn't necessarily your best work or your worst work. It's when an artist is so good at both the speed and the value combined, so they could keep producing these paintings or whatever it is. That's what you really want. You want to get to that peak, because you don't want it to look too good, but you spend like 3, 4, 5 days on it, right? But you don't want it to be too fast to where they all suck, but they're really fast, right? You want that peak, to where it's like, I'm pushing these out, daily, but they look like this, which is not that. It's not bad at all, to be honest. It looks really good. I like it anyways. But anyway, some people don't like it. But anyways, my number one is Akira Toriyama. The guy who influenced Bangis, the guy who influenced me, the guy who influenced everybody. I mean, this is the guy, bro. This is the guy who started it, in my opinion, who started it all. Yeah. I mean, the fireball, yes, he did it first. I'm trying to think who did it first. If it was Goku or Street Fighter, I'm thinking it was Goku. I'm thinking it was Goku. I have to go back and see, but yeah, and then just the whole power level thing and the power up thing. The whole reason people like Ryu and Evil Ryu and Angel Ryu and Shin Akuma, all those different forms and shit, that started with Akira Toriyama when he did the forms with Dragon Ball Z. You know what I mean? It's like he started most of these things. Even though his world building isn't as good, guess who started the power level things and the world building things? Akira Toriyama. Okay, like I said, it's not as good as it is now. A lot of other animes do it better now, but the first guy who started all of that was this guy, Akira Toriyama. With Dragon Ball Z. I mean, he's just the best. I mean, and this is his art, his original art, and it's pretty much the same thing. It's a what I like about Akira Toriyama more than any other artist, and they all have the same thing as well. And I'm pretty sure if you ask them, they're gonna tell you, yeah, Akira Toriyama is a big influence on me too. Is his composition. His composition of what he fits into a page or he fits into a panel is perfect, dude. He's like the perfect compositor. What was it? Composer, I guess you could say. A composer of art. You know, and he, it's simple. Like right here, it's a motorcycle, but then Goku is behind her. I mean, yeah, behind her flying. Right? Perfect composition. Right here, he fits 1, 2, 3, 4 characters with their weapons. Right? Perfect composition. Same thing goes over here. You got Master Roshi, 3 dinosaurs, and Goku. Perfect composition. He has the best composition, in my opinion. Go look at his comic books, you know, and look at how there's nothing wasted on the page. And also his pages aren't like he has classic pages. You know, he's not really doing some crazy, you know, stuff. Some towards the end he started doing more different types of things, but at the beginning it's very square shaped, you know, basic common shapes. And then his composition, what he puts in the page, you know, not an inch is wasted. You know, there's not big spaces in there where like, oh, what's going on here? Or he didn't know what to draw here. No, he knows exactly what he's going to draw where. You know, and most of these guys, you know, Bangis, look at his composition as well. It's very good too. You know, in all of these. Look at this. He's very good at these where he has to put several characters together in one page. You know? Now, I still would give it, in my opinion, I still would give Akira Toriyama, you know, better composition skills than Bangis, because some of his stuff do look kind of crowded sometimes. But it still looks good. Like, look at this here. Right? But a lot of these guys are very good composers of the page. And some of these guys aren't so much because they put too much words. Like, for example, Eric McGruger or whatever, the guy who, I forgot his name, but the guy who does the Boondock Saints. A lot of his stuff they have big bubbles and it has just one small guy there. And the composition there, you know, is a bit imbalance. Right? Because it's a big word bubble and just a small little dude, which is common in a lot of comic book strips, right? But in my opinion, it doesn't compare to the composition level of Akira Toriyama. You know, Akira Toriyama, you know, it's so each panel is so balanced. I mean, you could even look back at the whole page and look at the composition of the whole page. It doesn't compare. And even when his predecessor, you know, the guy who was drawing for him for Dragon Ball Super, I think his name was damn, I forgot his name, but that guy, his composition is somewhere, you know, at that level, but not quite at that level yet, because a lot of his stuff is just not as, it doesn't have the same flow, you know. But anyways, R.I.P. Akira Toriyama, you know, one of the best, whoever did it, you know, big influence to me and big influence to all of the people that influenced me. I bet if you ask Bangis, I think he said it already. But if you ask the rest of these guys if they were influenced by Akira Toriyama, they're gonna say yes. Because if you look at it, the eyes are kind of the same as Akira Toriyama's. You know, because look at Akira Toriyama's eyes and the composition of the face and the ear. You know, and the minimalist way that he just drew, to where it was easy for him to draw each one of these characters because he was already like, he had a way to do all of these things. You know, you look back at a lot of these guys, and the influence is there, bro, like crazy, whether they admit it or not. Akira Toriyama is pretty much the grandfather of all of us. Whoever ever picked up a pen and said, I want to draw, more than likely it was because of Akira Toriyama or someone who was influenced by Akira Toriyama. But anyways, that's going to be it for today. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And I will catch you guys later. Jeez.